Thor has to be one of the Marvel characters who's been most revitalized by the impact of the MCU. I mean, sure, there are loads of characters who've been made multimedia megastars by the impact of some of the biggest films of all time. But Thor, he's a literal god who speaks in Shakespearean demi-verse. He wears a big winged helmet and he hits things with a hammer. It's kind of a tough sell. But Marvel made it work, and by 2012, Thor and the rest of the Avengers were some of the hottest IP in town. Since the turn of the century, Marvel's comics output had been becoming more and more Avengers-centric, punctuated by regular crossover events and increasingly under the guidance of writer Brian Michael Bendis. Now, by the time Bendis took over the Avengers, Thor had been shuffled off the table, but was reintroduced in 2007, post-Civil War, by J. Michael Straczynski, who did an incredible run on Spider-Man, which I'm a huge fan of. And so once again, Thor was a vital part of Marvel's comics universe. And he got to ride the MCU wave to movie stardom. Now, in 2012, in the wake of Marvel's first Avengers movie, the Marvel Now branding was presented as a fresh start and jumping on point for most of Marvel's comics titles. New creative teams gave fresh spins on classic characters, and we got some all-time great runs out of it. Believe me, I've got a few episodes planned to tackle Jonathan Hickman's epic Avengers run that leads into Secret Wars. But today, it's all about Thor. It's Thor's Day! Well, I mean, I'm recording this on a Monday and I've no idea when you're going to watch it, but I guess it's always Thor's Day here? Writer Jason Aaron was coming to the end of a great run on Wolverine, and was riding high with Wolverine and the X-Men when Marvel Now came along and gave him an opportunity to jump on Thor. Artist Ishard Ribic had done incredible work, most notably on the Marvel Knights Silver Surfer and Submariner miniseries, and a great arc of Rick Remender's Uncanny X-Force, and this pair would give us Thor, God of Thunder, the first 2 volumes, or 11 issues, of which we're going to be looking at today. God of Thunder takes a broader view of Thor's place in the Marvel Universe, interweaving narratives from 3 time periods into Thor's millennia-long existence into one coherent and compelling story. In Viking-era Iceland, a young Thor, not yet worthy of Mjolnir, is disturbed from his revels by the discovery of butchered remains of gods from the distant Americas. In modern day, the Avenger Thor answers the prayers of the scorched world of Indigar by bringing rain to their blasted lands, but is confounded by the absence of the planet's own gods. He sets out to find them, only to discover them butchered in a manner that recalls the gods of the Americas from centuries ago. In the far future, alone in a deserted Asgard, old King Thor faces off against endless legions of black berserkers, defeated time after time, but never allowed to die. Viking Thor faces off against Gore, the God Butcher, a being determined to murder all gods across creation. Modern-day Thor realizes that Gore survived their Viking-era battle and swears to find him and end his rampage. He chases Gore through time, and the Thors come together in the far future. Together, they must stop the completion of Gore's final scheme, the God Bomb, a device that will eradicate all gods across all time and creation. Thor, God of Thunder is bonkers. Brilliant, bonkers, and badass. I mean, first of all, just look at it. Just look at it. This is a book that looks like a series of a Monomath album covers, or something that's been airbrushed onto the side of a van. It's unbelievably cool. Ishard Ribic's art sets the tone for the book as soon as you lay eyes on it. Honestly, this feels more like heroic fantasy than it does a superhero book, and that's a great fit for Thor. This story has the barest of connections to the wider Marvel Universe, and it really allows Jason Aaron to build up Thor's corner of Marvel mythology, exploring the idea of gods as real beings in the universe and how that affects mortals who feel wronged by them. It's a high-concept book, but it's very accessible in its presentation. One might assume that the time-skipping narrative might be confusing, but aided by Ribic's beautiful, almost cinematic transitions, Aaron lays everything out perfectly, cementing exactly where the reader is in Thor's life. The first volume in particular proceeds in this non-linear fashion, but as we head into the second volume and the three Thors come together, the time twisting becomes a race against time to stop Gorr's plan, the titular God Bomb. This streamlining kicks the book into high gear as a series of increasingly over-the-top action sequences. The battle rages across the stars, worlds used as weapons, and people get hit with space sharks. Oh, no, you heard me. Space sharks. Plural. It is epic in every sense of the word, as Ribic renders a war in the heavens in his muscular lines and heavy shadowing, whilst Aaron weaves mythic-sounding narration around it. The whole thing, from beginning to end, feels like a grand Norse saga. This is not to say, of course, that the story has a slow start. Even as the story zips between the three Thors, there's a healthy peppering of action in between the world building and the growing threat of Gorr's butcherous crusade to wipe out all gods. Every good story needs a good villain, of course, and Gorr the God Butcher is one of the best new villains Marvel has introduced in the last decade or so, easily. In issue 6, which opens the second volume, Butch Geist takes over art duties for an extended flashback delving into Gorr's origins. The hardships of this man's life turn him against gods he no longer believes in, and we see him initially as a sympathetic figure, orphaned, widowed, and eventually robbed of his children by a relentlessly cruel existence. When he comes across the reality of the existence of gods, however, he also finds the means to kill them, and sets off to eradicate them all. It's a descent into villainy that follows a classic pattern, a wronged man seeking vengeance, becoming the thing he hates. It's a perfect punctuation to the midpoint of the story, a moment for the stakes to be made crystal clear, and making Gorr a more rounded character heading into the climax. The artifact that gives Gorr his powers is the perfect conceit for Ribic to show off his shadow-heavy art style, the use of black space filled with heavy pencil strokes giving a pleasing texture to the art, paired wonderfully with Ives Forcina and Dean White's in the first issue, muted but far from drab colour palette. There's a muscularity, a weight to the art that is exemplified in these moments that stops the book from becoming too ridiculous, instead grounding the lofty mythologizing of the narrative in earthy, grimy combat and enveloping shadow. The violence and darkness of this book is a thing of beauty, carefully balanced with just enough levity to stop it from tipping over into nihilism. This is still a superhero book after all, but to still be taken as seriously as it's intended. This might also be the most metal comic Marvel have ever published. I mean, Gorr's weapon is called All Black, the Necro Sword, the Annihiblade, Slicer of Worlds. I mean, imagine those words uttered in a guttural roar over the top of a grinding riff and pile-driving drum beat. I mean, you barely have to imagine it. The book just puts off that vibe in spades. And as someone who was raised on Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath, someone who's grown up to love the prog metal weirdness of bands like Coheed and Cambria, Mastodon, Amon Amarth, The Sword, this book feels like it's custom made for my tastes. I've been a fan of Thor since Straczynski reinvigorated the character in 2007, and I've enjoyed the stories that followed by Gillen and Fraction, as well as the simpler pleasures of those early Lee and Kirby yarns, and the fantasy melodrama of Walt Simonson. But Aaron's Thor is a Norse myth made manifest in comic form more so than any of these other takes. Simonson comes close, but there's a darker edge here that just helps to evoke the bloodiness and grime of real-world legends. These first two volumes of God of Thunder represent the beginning of what has become a 7-year run on Thor for Aaron. It's a truly epic tale that explores the majesty and tragedy that is so common in real-world deity myths, marries it to the Marvel Universe, and presents it with a series of stunning artists. This is just the beginning of an incredible journey that also serves as a great starting point for anyone interested in reading Thor's adventures. If you want to read some modern Marvel classics, then God of Thunder, The God Butcher, and God Bomb are absolute must-reads. So, let us know how you feel about Thor, and if you have any Thor stories you love as much as I love God of Thunder, pop them in the comments below. You can also get us at BigDamnCast on Twitter and BigDamnContact@gmail.com. And don't forget to catch the Big Damn Cast every Thursday, wherever you get your podcasts. This show is made possible by the kind support of our patrons, and if you'd like to and are able to support us, you can do that over at patreon.com/BigDamnCast. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back in 2 weeks with some more Big Damn Love.